Joining us now is Katie Benner. She covers the Justice Department for the New York Times. She's been way ahead of everybody else reporting on Trump's post-election attempts to pressure the Justice Department. She was first to report on these documents from the Oversight Committee today. Katie, it's nice to see you. Thanks for making time.
Thanks for having me.
I feel like a lot of the attention today has focused on the new information that these documents give us about how the Trump White House and the president himself were pressuring the Justice Department. There's also been some attention to the fact that Justice Department officials sort of complained amongst themselves as to what the Trump White House was asking them to look at and asking them to do. I feel like there has been less attention to the fact that this stuff was farmed out to U.S. attorneys. I wondered if you had any perspective on that, given what you know about the Justice Department.
Sure. I mean, I think that what we saw in those last few weeks before the January 6th attack, you saw officials basically tacitly agreeing with one another that they would not do anything. They would take in material, they would forward it along. It was almost like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Everybody knew that nobody was going to open an investigation or appoint a special counsel, but they were trying to placate the president. Now, the most generous read of this, and what I've heard from some sources, is that people really felt that they needed to stay in their places because if they were to get fired or if they were to be pushed out, they would be replaced by, at that point, who knew? There were real concerns that it could be somebody like a Rudy Giuliani figure who would do, things with the Justice Department that should never be done. So that is one read of it. And another is that we saw 4 years of the Justice Department being attacked by the president. We saw him publicly pressuring officials in extraordinary ways that have not been done really since the Nixon era. And over those 4 years, we almost became numb to it. And I think that goes for people inside of the Justice Department as well. Conversations reporting that has showed up in the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, and other outlets shows that officials also began to have conversations amongst themselves to the effect of, well, if we don't do it, how bad is it? If the coup doesn't happen, how bad is it? We kept law and order in place. Nobody really knows this is happening in the public view. We can hold things together. So, I mean, that you really do get a flavor of that in these emails. To your point, grumbling, passing things along, but nobody actually taking any action, no investigations launched. Everybody kind of just nodding as well as they can.
And the one person who resigns here, about whom we still don't really know the backstory, is B.J. Peck, who is the U.S. attorney in Georgia. We're sort of tightening the timeline in terms of what we don't know here. We see the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, forwarding sort of some of the Moonbat, Georgia stuff to the Attorney General. Within a couple of days, he's sending more stuff and asking for a specific Justice Department official who seems inclined toward the president's view of the election to look into what's going on in Georgia. We now know the Attorney General, Jeffrey Rosen, passed on the U.S. attorney in Georgia's phone number to him. And within a couple of days, he had resigned and was being thanked for his resignation by one of these senior Justice Department officials who had just been promoted. Do we know anything more about what B.J. Peck was asked to do or what led to his resignation?
Well, if you look at the documents, one of the other interesting things that we see is that there is a very tense meeting that the New York Times originally reported on that takes place that day, where you have the president essentially deciding whether or not he's going to keep acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen in place or whether or not he's going to replace him with the acting head of the Civil Division, Jeff Clark. Jeff Clark believed the president's assertions that he had actually, won the election or that fraud had so damaged the election the results could not be known. Clark was a true believer, and he was constantly trying to get other officials on board with some sort of plan to do something, particularly in Georgia, particularly in Fulton County. So we see this showdown happen at the White House. We see timestamps coming out of that meeting between 9 and 10 p.m., where various officials are saying, okay, we don't have a full readout, but we think that Rosen's going to remain acting Attorney General. We think that one email even says the cause of justice won. We are not going to have somebody who believes these conspiracy theories running the Justice Department. A lot of that meeting was about Georgia. A lot of that meeting was about Donald Trump's true belief that something had happened in Georgia. He had that call with Brad Raffensperger in Georgia, trying to get him to do something to find votes, to find fraud, to find evidence that would cast in doubt who had won that state. And then we see this really tense and awful meeting happen. It's after that meeting that you see Rosen's deputy email B.J. Peck It's only a few minutes after the entire top of the Justice Department has been debriefed on what happened in this meeting. The president's obsession with Georgia is known. The fact that something is going to probably happen to BJ Pak, or he's going to be mentioned, he was already mentioned on the call with Brad Raffensperger, is known. And then it is at that point that the number 2 official at the department calls Pak. And you can assume that he likely explains to him what has just transpired in the meeting and President Trump's obsession with Georgia. And he probably presents him with a couple of options. Now, if you were BJ Pak, I don't know what you would do. I don't know for sure what I would do. I will say one option being to quietly leave before I'm tweeted about and my reputation is utterly destroyed by President Trump. Doesn't sound like the worst option in the world. And you can also say that that is still completely inappropriate and undue pressure, the fact that that option was even on the table. But that is one of the most interesting things about the timing of Pak's departure, is it happens after this long meeting where you almost see every single official at the top of the Justice Department resign in protest because of what the president intends to do or wants to do around Georgia.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the fact that there is a criminal investigation underway by a Georgia state prosecutor now as to whether or not the president may have acted criminally when he tried to interfere in the administration of the election in Georgia. It raises questions as to whether that might be another avenue, that investigation may be another avenue toward figuring that out, whether BJ Pak may in fact end up being a witness in the state investigation. It remains to be seen. Of course, Katie Benner, reporter covering the Justice Department for the New York Times. Katie, this beat keeps getting weirder and weirder. Thank you for helping us understand it.
Thanks.